Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom.
shalom.
How you
Shabbat
guys?
shalom.
Shalom.
How
How
you
you
guys?
doing?
I'm doing good. How about you guys?
Pretty
I'm
good.
good.
Pretty
I'm
good.
great.
Doing good.
Yeah.
I'm awesome.
You wanna introduce somebody, Rico?
Dude, we have our special guest. We have the realest dude here with us today.
Hello.
What's
This is my wife, Eva.
Hola, hola.
What up?
Let you know.
Mrs. Cortes.
Hey, Rico. Why is she the realest dude, man?
I'm so glad you asked. Oh, wow. She is the realest dude because it turns out the real dudes started all because of you.
Yeah.
There we go.
Well, it started with a question.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't you guys have a chat or don't you guys get together once in a while?
Yeah.
And the answer from all of the dudes was
No.
Yeah, it was like,
why not?
Now here we
Why
are.
not?
It
So-
was such a beautiful moment in a campfire under a tree. We were
Yeah.
all there getting
Remember that.
emotional. And she's like,
True.
yo, y'all don't talk to each other outside of this? And we were like, we know. And she's like,
Oh,
make
yeah.
it real,
We
make
suck.
a
Okay,
chat.
we don't do that, do we?
we're like, oh yeah,
Now
technology.
here we are.
And then the real dude was born. I don't know anything that has gone on, like on the chat afterwards. So
No,
Yeah.
I'm not responsible for
It
anything.
expanded. We got new people.
You are the forefather, but then you just left
just
it.
stepped right out.
No.
You're the
Let it
forefather,
be.
but then
She
you
saw a
left.
tire fire when she knew it. She just stepped out and just let it all
Just let it be.
burn itself
It's
out.
like that fire burned some of the branches on the tree.
I remember that. That was pretty
There's
bad.
still no leaves on those branches. There's still nothing there.
Well,
It went places.
Well, anyway, the purpose of this episode is that we wanted to talk about honor and shame. We talked about it a little bit last week, but I wanted to go more into detail because I think it's a very it's a good topic to learn about because it expands a lot the New Testament, makes it easier to understand, and it kind of explains why some things were happening in the New Testament. You know, it wasn't just random, but there was a purpose behind those things.
I mean, even not so much in the New Testament. It explains a lot of the motivations and actions taken in the Old Testament.
Well, yeah, also the Old Testament because I do have some examples.
Yeah,
from the Old
there are
Testament.
some weird interactions and wording that go on. They're like, wait, why did they do that? Why that happen? If you understand the concepts of honor, shame, raising up of honor, lowering of honor, its status, and all that, you'll understand why they did the certain things they did or said the way they said the things the way they did.
Yeah. So, what was it? So, there's different aspects towards honor and shame. We're gonna go through each one and explain it. We got ascribed honor. There was acquired honor. Under that one would be challenge and reproach. There's honor by swearing of an oath, and then there is honor status reversal. So we're gonna go through each aspect and expand upon it. So to go over the first one, ascribed honor is basically status given to you through birth, through your genealogy.
Being a king or an emperor of some kind.
Yeah, like we go
May I
ahead.
say something?
Yeah.
So before we really get into the thick of honor and shame, I think it's important that we kind of put out like what are we talking about honor and shame in the Bible? And whenever we're talking about honor and shame, we're talking about social forces that just exist in life and society, like honor and shame, as well as guilt and innocence. Well, all of these kind of are some of the social forces which balance and influence us in how we interact with one another. And
social constructs.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Social constructs.
Yeah, social constructs. And we're just analyzing these social constructs, these social forces, and how they show up in the Bible.
Yeah,
right?
I forgot to
And
mention
not
that
only
part.
and
From
not
a
only how
Western
they
perspective, too.
and not only how they show up in the Bible, but how they also manifest themselves in today and how we deal with them as Torah keepers.
Yeah. So, I forgot to mention that because you see, the thing is, a lot of people, they try to apply our current culture, which is not exactly the same to the Bible. Like you said, innocence and what was it?
And guilt.
Innocence and guilt. That I think that's what they say. Our culture is more.
We lean more on those.
We lean more on that one. We do
Right.
some have aspects towards honor and shame, but we don't live in that exact same culture that we did back in those times. So to really understand the Bible, you have to understand how the culture was at that time. And that's what we're doing. So I forgot to mention that part.
Right.
But going back, ascribed honor is, like I said, is status given to you through your birth or genealogy, like Rico said, like kings. Like we see that today with, like in England, they have like their royalty. As soon as they're born, they're instantly, they have that fame, that honor of being a royal baby. Like, they didn't do anything. But just by being a baby, it's like, whoa.
royalty.
If you really want to see a good example of royalty that probably doesn't deserve to be royalty, the current king of Thailand is a very good example. Go and Google that, and you get a good laugh out of that one. So,
But it doesn't even have to be like royalty. It could also be like just by name, like Rockefeller. If somebody's born a Rockefeller, he already has his instant status just because of by birth, and we see a lot of that. Yeah.
oh,
So we
God.
see a lot of that in the Bible too. You know, for example, the Levitical priesthood. People that are born in the Levitical priesthood, they have an honor given to them by God.
Right.
In that lineage, you know, you can't just be like, "Hey, I want to be part of this." Like, no, it doesn't work like that. You know. And then you also have, you know, the line of David. After you know what happened with Saul, and he started to be king. From David on, it followed, you know, his lineage.
Right.
Things like that. I don't know if you guys were you gonna say something or no? What do you guys?
No, we're just agreeing with you.
Oh, okay.
Well, we're agreeing now.
Well, you know, it explains a lot why in the New Testament you see like Luke in the Gospel of Luke in the beginning, it shows the genealogy of Yeshua, and a lot of people are like, well, why do I need to see this? Like, I believe, you know, he's the son of God and everything. I believe he's, you know, from the lineage of David. Why did he need to show like this whole like in the son of this and the son of that and the son of that and that guy and that guy and this guy? And the reason why it's doing that is because, like I said, you know, you have a status given to you through birth, through lineage, and what Luke is trying to do is establish that honor, you know, ascribed to Yeshua through his lineage, you know, asserting himself as, you know, the rightful king to Israel, and you know,
Yeah, so much so that like when you view after like post Yeshua, the leader of the council was Yeshua's brother. But you don't really see Yeshua's brother beforehand. Like you don't really like hear of him. You don't hear he's a disciple or anything.
Yeah.
Yet when Yeshua leaves, the leader of the council of Jerusalem was Jacob. And the reason that he's attributed that, according to what we have so far, historically, is because he was the brother of Yeshua. And lineage is very important in the Bible. Very important.
Yeah. So once you understand that, like how that works, it explains away a lot of how things go. You know.
Which actually, I do want to make a quick point. So in the genealogy of Yeshua, it obviously ends with Yeshua being the son of Joseph, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it goes Joseph and then Yeshua, but we see in the story itself that he wasn't. He was a supernatural birth, right? He wasn't birthed directly from him. So anyone at the time that would have read that, who studied, who even knew anything of even a passing knowledge of adoption laws, wouldn't have a question of wait. But if he wasn't actually born from him, if that's not really his biological father, then why is he included in the genealogy? Because anyone that would have known the adoption laws at that time would know that Joseph claimed him at birth while still covered in the amniotic fluid. Therefore, he is now legally and by all accounts of the society at the time, Joseph's, which means now he does belong as part of that line, which does legitimize him as being the future king of the line of Judah.
Yeah, but what's also an interesting point, because yes, that's true. Adoption laws work that way. If somebody adopts a kid, his lineage becomes the kid's lineage becomes the person that was adopted.
Right.
I don't know if I'm wording that correctly. I think I kind of twist myself there.
You didn't.
But I think people understand what I mean. But at the same time, it also shows the lineage through his mother's side to also reassert the fact that yes, he is from the line of, you know, royalty. Yeah, so it's like, you know, like, oh, like, that's not his real dad. Well, on his mom's side, you know.
Yeah, because in Jewish tradition, they establish it by the mom.
Yeah, it's through the mother. For some reason, it's through the mother.
Yeah, so that's a pretty.
The mother is the one who's religious.
Yeah, and it makes sense why also in the Old Testament you have like the genealogies, and a lot of people they skip through that. Like, it's like, why is this here? What's the point of this? And it's establishing like, hey, like these people come from this, you know, lineage of honorable people.
Because let's be honest, that is the worst read. Right?
Yeah, you speed read it. You speed read it. You're
like it's the worst. Like you're reading and it's like, this is the son of this, and this is the son of that, and you're like, I have
saying the names in a funny word.
Yeah, the names are hard. And he was like, he was this much old when he had this son, and then he died at this age.
You're like,
and
Here's the thing, like
I want to
sometimes,
be done with the book of
sometimes
Numbers.
that does pay off. Sometimes when you read the text and it tells you about this person, which was this age when they had this person as
Mhm.
daughter, then you read a different story and it mentions this person. Like, oh, so that means that they were still alive to see this. That means so.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you do the math, you see it.
Yeah, so it kind of helps
Yeah.
flesh the whole story they're telling.
Because
to
I
include
think,
other people.
I
It
think if
makes
I'm
it flesh it out, but it's still like a heavy read.
because I think if I'm
For the
correct,
first
I think
chapters at
You're
least.
not wrong. Yeah.
if you do the math, you will see that Adam should have been there either at Noah's birth or a little bit before, something like that, based on
Yeah.
how long he lived and stuff like that.
You would have known about him.
Yeah,
No, like when you realize according to the lineage, right? You're like, oh, Noah was alive when Jacob was alive, and you're like, wait, what? Yeah. Noah, the one who lived the boat, was alive when Jacob was alive, and you're like,
That's crazy.
well, that's kind of crazy.
yeah. Because I
All
mean,
right, that's awesome.
at one point the Pharaoh he asks, I can't think of the name. The Pharaoh he asks Jacob, no, not Jacob,
Joseph.
Joseph.
Joseph, no, not Joseph, his father, Joseph's father.
Oh, it was Jacob.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was
I don't know.
Jacob.
I wanted to see somebody else, but he asked Jacob like, "How do you live so old?" He's like, "I'm not even old. You should see my ancestors. Those guys live forever, man.
Yeah.
We're down the road. You can see him now.
You gonna be my great
Dude, they
grandpa."
last like 300 years, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. But
But we were talking about ascribed honor, right? Through our genealogies,
Yeah.
like what we've all been talking about.
uh-huh.
And I think what you mentioned, you and Rico were talking about how Yeshua was adopted by Joseph, right?
Yeah.
So I think that kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but that kind of moves us into our next speaking point, which is
Yes.
acquired honor.
Exactly.
So it's to say that, tracing his line back through Mary, we see that he's a legitimate son of David biologically through one line of David, but then we go trace him through Joseph's line, and Joseph was in line for the throne, so to speak. That was the line that the scepter was passed through. And now Yeshua has acquired that status as being part of that line. So where he might not have the curse that line had on it, that it would never inherit the throne again, he's now acquired legitimacy into that line of the throne. And now he's acquired that status, but say without the curse that was put on him. What was it? Jehoiachin? Was that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is shown kind of way before, right? And what I mean by that is the process of like giving authority or honor to someone who was not necessarily meant to receive it, right? And the first aspects where we have this is with the sons of Jacob, where you have the firstborn, right? And you think the firstborn has the duty to have the firstborn rights and all these things, right?
Yeah.
And maybe Isaac, right? But for example, Reuben was the oldest son,
Yes.
but he didn't get the firstborn rights.
Blessing, yeah.
Why didn't he get the firstborn rights, right? And when you read the story, it's like, oh wait, like he
did
he
something
had
really
some
bad.
crazy stuff
Yeah.
going down.
They all
And
did.
then after that, and then after that, you have Simeon and Levi.
Yeah.
You had Simeon and Levi, and they didn't get the firstborn rights because they also did some crazy stuff, like some really crazy stuff. And then you have Judah. Judah's the fourth born, yet Judah's the one who gets the firstborn rights. And you're like, why so? It's because as we're moving towards right now, it's like, yeah, you are giving the firstborn right. You're giving something that's inherited. But in the Torah, even though you are inherited that blessing, there's still like an expectation that you have to uphold, which
Yes.
leads to the like you're giving the blessing.
Right.
Mhm.
You're giving said things, which is what we're leading towards now.
Yeah.
And just to make everyone aware, this can go both ways. You can have
Mhm.
ascribed honor and ascribed shame,
Yeah.
right? If you meet anyone whose last name is Hitler, you're going to know that really well.
Yeah, that's
Really,
gonna be
really
like,
tough in
oh
school,
wait,
man.
you're
For that guy,
Oh, he is the son of that guy.
Your name's
Or
Adolf.
Great grandson of this guy.
Yeah, it's a two-way street. It's a two-way street, you know.
right, exactly. And it's the same with acquired honor, right? Just as easily as you gain honor, you can also acquire shame.
Because acquired honor is not just through like adoption and stuff like that. You can also do it
Yeah.
through like if you have a victory, like a military victory, like David when he defeated Goliath and they started singing that song. You know, he killed 10,000s and Saul killed 1,000, and that pissed
Yeah.
that pissed Saul off.
But actually, that's a great example because that in of itself is an example of the duality of shame and honor. Because they're in that same song, they're honoring David and shaming Saul at the same time for what is essentially it's still a victory, but it's not as much of a victory.
Yeah, it was like a burn / appraisal.
It's exactly this.
Yeah,
it's a little bit of a burn.
Century's first diss track is really what it is.
Well, yeah, you know, if you fail in a way that's historical, you're always going to be remembered for that failure. So like you said, it's a two-way street. You can get acquired shame or ascribed shame, just the same way you can get honor.
Yep.
And another way that you can get honor is through challenge and riposte. And basically what that is like, you know, if you read the Bible, a lot of the times the Pharisees would go and confront Yeshua about something. One in particular was in like Luke 13, when he healed this woman on the Sabbath. I don't know. We should probably read that. That way, there's context.
Sorry.
Let me see.
Luke 13, verse what?
I think it's like 7.
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't put the verse down. Yeah.
A woman is it a
It's
woman
gonna say
with
something.
a disabling spirit?
Yeah, yeah.
For a specific one.
I just want to cover that section where they talk about the woman when she gets healed in Luke chapter
It says,
15.
now
10. It's from the 10.
Yeah, okay.
10, yeah.
So let me see. So it says, I got it. Okay. So it says, now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and behold, there was a woman who had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, and was bent over and could in no way raise herself up. But when Yeshua saw her, he called her to him and said to her, woman, you are loosed from your infirmity. And he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight and glorified God. But the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation because Yeshua had healed on the Sabbath. And he said to the crowd, there are 6 days on which men ought to work, therefore come and be healed on them, and not on the Sabbath day. Then Yeshua answered him and said, hypocrite, does not each one of you on the Sabbath loose his ox or donkey from the stall and lead it away to the water? So ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has bound, think of it, for 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath? And when he said these things, all his adversaries were put to shame, and all his multitude rejoiced for all the glorious things that were done by him. So basically, that's a good example of challenge and reports, because he tried to embarrass Yeshua. He was like, oh, you know, you don't have to heal on the Sabbath. There's other days to do that. And then he was like, well, what about, like, he threw it back on him. He was like, I know you're going to help your ox if he gets stuck in the mud or something like that. You're going to try to save your animal. So if you're going to save your animal, but you're not going to save a person on the Sabbath day, that's kind of hypocritical. And he was the leader of that of the synagogue. So he shamed the leader, and he elevated the woman by calling her a descendant of Abraham. So, what was it?
And what's interesting is that he ascribes the healing to Yeshua, and he focuses on that. But when she's healed, she basically gives honor to Elohim.
Yeah,
exactly.
By glorifying him
Immediately.
immediately.
Yep.
You gonna say something?
Yeah. Go.
Yeah. Can I say something that? Okay, I'm gonna be as brief as possible. It's gonna take us a little bit off topic, a little bit, not too much. I'm gonna try to rein it in as much as possible. We've all heard the parable of the Good Samaritan, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, and a lot of people confuse whom Yeshua is trying to give honor to, right? Because there's someone who's receiving honor, and it's the Good Samaritan, right? Who is the person who's receiving the honor in the parable of Good Samaritan? Which kind of goes alongside with what you're saying now, Johnny, about when Yeshua decided to heal in a Shabbat, where he was like, hey, you don't understand the giving justice to people, because that's what Yeshua was doing. He was giving justice. He was giving mercy, right? Giving mercy to people goes every day. Like, there's no end to that, right? And you have this. So to go a little bit sideways is to give a little bit of an explanation to this parable, right? And it's that Yeshua is saying, hey, who was the Good Samaritan? And what people don't sometimes realize is that the Good Samaritan is the person who does the goodwill. That's the Good Samaritan. And that's who Yeshua is telling you to be. He's not asking you, he's not pertaining to whom you should give mercy to. He's not asking that question is who gave mercy? You should be that person. And why he's saying those things is because giving mercy brings forth honor, which is what we're saying now, right? With Yeshua healing on the Shabbat. It's like, why would Yeshua go out of his way to give mercy to another person? It's because when you give mercy, it attributes honor to you. Because mercy can be, as we've been saying, earned. Honor can be earned. I'm sorry, I said mercy. Honor can be earned. And how is honor earned? Through good actions, through living a life of righteousness, through giving mercy, right? If you give mercy, people are going to say, hey, that guy is a good person.
That guy.
That's a good person. That's a good person. That's attributed honor. That's attributed honor because you earn that honor through your actions. And that's very important. And we have to realize that even Yeshua's teaching that we have to be like aware of what we do and what we give, because that will also respond to us, who we are and who people perceive us to be.
Well, I think that kind of takes us to the next point, because the thing about challenge and riposte is not just about you embarrassing people in public and, you know, burning people. It's also like your actions also have to match up with what you're saying. Like,
yeah.
Another good example would be when Yeshua was sitting with the tax collectors, you know, and a thing I never understood as a kid reading the New Testament, I was like, why is it such a bad thing to sit with a tax collector? Because they would say, like, he's sitting with the tax collectors and the sinners. It's like, man, it's gotta be really bad.
As we know, like the IRS, tax collectors are greedy and evil people.
It's like lawyers. Lawyers are all liars.
Yeah, so... And then when you start studying about the culture, about honor and shame, and tax collectors, nobody liked them, so they had this stigma on them. So if you were caught with a tax collector, like, you were shamed with that person because nobody likes that person. You hang out with the person, that also falls on you. Yeah. But Yeshua, being Yeshua, he hanged out with those people because he was trying to show them, like, yo, the thing about your culture, it's wrong. Okay, like.
Yeah, the shame that they were being put through, he gave them the honor that they deserved.
Yeah.
So
can I add that so when we're talking about honor and shame specifically in the first century, what we see Yeshua doing and how he's ascribing people honor, how he's going around, he's basically beating this whole concept of honor and shame in the first century on the head, how people viewed it back then. And so I should probably explain myself better. In the first century, and this kind of goes back to what we were saying, how challenge and riposte is always something that happens in the public sphere. Yeah. There's always an audience around. You always have, say, Yeshua and the scribes or the Pharisees. Someone comes up and challenges him. They want to get the best of him or embarrass him in the public eye. So everyone can look at him and be like,
exactly.
Say what?
Discredit him.
Yeah, discredit him. Exactly. And they want everyone to be like, oh, like, they just got Yeshua.
Yeah.
Like, everyone's gonna be like, and then they're going to go tell their friends and be like, man, like, Yeshua just got roasted by the Pharisees or something like that. And so that always happens in the public eye. And that's because in the first century, honor was, how did you say, like a zero-sum thing. You know, there's only so much honor out there, and someone's got to be honorable and someone's got to be shameful. Someone's got to get the best of the other guy. Exactly. It's kind of like in high school. Right? Like, we've all gone through something like this. There's always the popular kids or the school bully who's going around and making someone else feel little because they got to be cool. They got to be cool by putting someone else down. And people were doing this like crazy in the first century. Like, I've got to be the big, pompous, pious guy. I've got to be better than everyone else. Oh, and another teacher comes along who's trying to elevate these dirty people. Like, no, get back in your place. Get back in your place. Like, that's not how it works in Judea. And so, but Yeshua comes along and he says, no, that's not how honor works in my Father's kingdom, in my Father's house. You don't go around bullying people to receive honor in my Father's house. Merciful is an honorable thing. You elevate those everyone who you're shaming and putting down, it's like they are members of my Father's house. They have inherited honor from being my Father's children. Don't put them down. And so Yeshua is turning the system on its head. I think that's just a really important thing to point out.
Take
Yeah,
it
you almost made me cry, bro.
To add to what you're saying, it's everything that goes on in the New Testament with Yeshua against the Pharisees and the scribes, and everyone that tries to call him out in the public sphere constantly. A lot of that still happens even today on the internet.
Mm.
It's even applicable today. People are chasing clout all the time.
Oh, yeah.
That's what cancel culture is. That's this.
Yeah, it's
This
embarrassing
whole
somebody.
thing is what cancel culture is. It's about trying to shame this person so you get honor, so people know your name, so people talk about you because you're cool. You're the cool guy that called
Get all
out
the
this.
likes.
They're like, I'm not gonna like you. I'm gonna unfollow you right now.
Like, shares,
Precisely.
all that.
It's everyone wants eyes on you as you tear down this guy and call him out and shame him, or you get honored from him.
And when you study the history too, like
Yeah.
the Jewish community, some of the Jews, not all the Jews, they were trying to fit in with the Greeks or the Romans. I'm sorry. So you'd have some trying to reverse their circumcision, because they want to go and hang out in the gymnasiums or the what do you call it, the saunas, the baths, where they.
At the bathhouse.
And what I learned recently
Totally
from your dad, Rico Senior, and he was talking about how those were the places where people did business and stuff like that. So if you wanted to be in, you had to, fit in.
You want to be in with the cool crowd. You gotta reverse that down there, and then you gotta get on the gymnasium.
So people were going to extremes to fit in, and that was the problem that was going on when Yeshua came. That they were assimilating to that culture that was, like Russell was saying, putting people down to put themselves up. And he's saying, like, no, you don't do that. You reach down to those people and you pick them up with you. We're all in this together. You don't put people down.
You bring equity.
And that's also a thing I've seen today, like for example, when I used to go to Pentecostal churches, you'd see people put down people. Like there'd be a pastor, he'd call somebody up to the front and be like, oh, you're doing this, this, and this, and this. And he would, embarrass the person, basically. Shame them in front of everybody. And then the pastor, he looks good because he's fixing the problem, and then the guy, he's embarrassed. Sometimes they leave, sometimes they stay, but they have that thing always over their head.
Yep.
And that's not what you're supposed to do. Yeshua didn't say that you're supposed to get people and blast them up on the top and be like, look, this guy, he's a sinner, beat him, Like, no.
Yeah, it's Yeshua himself gives a parable that has very much to do with this, and it kind of like Yeshua gives the way we should live as Torah keepers. He says, hey, there's nothing to gain with you inviting to your house people who can pay you back. There's nothing to gain with that. Like, you can invite people who can pay you back every day, but you will gain nothing. But if you invite someone who can pay you back to your house and you make them sit at your own table, if you do that, you have heaven won. And it's that mentality of, hey, raising people up to your standards, not lowering them down, but like lifting them up, saying, sit with me at my table. And it has everything to do with this honor and shame, because you're saying you deserve this amount of respect. No matter anything, you deserve this amount of respect. Come sit at my table.
Yeah, and that's kind of, that's the purpose of, like, when we help the homeless, the widows, the needies, the orphans. It's not just to look good. It's to restore those people, because those people, they're broken. Those people are broken. They have this shame put on them by other people. Our job is to help restore that honor and be like, hey, you know what? People might say this about you, but my God says that in his eyes, if you follow what he says, you're just as honorable, as me, and he'll be with you. You're his friend,
And this same principle, not just honor and shame, but also challenge and repose. All this wraps all the way back to the Exodus, right? So this whole thing even wraps up back then when Adonai came to free the Israelites from Egypt, right? He proved that they were of innocence. He proved they were not of that status of being a slave. They were not worthy of that. He lifted them out of slavery, declared them to be free, raised up their status, right? So that was the first mark of honor, right? He discarded their shame of being slaves, made them their own nation. And then the next step after that, after Mount Sinai and everything, he granted them the tzitzits, which back then was the mark of someone of a higher status, of being of royalty, of being in a priesthood. He said, now you're all a nation of priests. You're all the upper echelons of the society at the time. So that was another mark of honor that he bestowed upon them, that he ascribed onto them. Whatever they did before and after to bring shame on themselves. That's neither here nor there. But the point is, these same principles were there right from the beginning, right? From the formation of the nation of Israel out of Egypt, and from the declaration of their freedom, the conquering of the Egyptian gods to show the supremacy of Adonai, repulsing the challenge that the Egyptians posed to the Israelites, saying they're unworthy by throwing them in the river. So all that kind of wraps up back to kind of these key points, and even still reverberates.
Right, and I'm gonna say something that's a little bit controversial, including the laws of slavery inside of the Torah. They do this thing which they bring forth honor to the slave, right? Because I know that there's gonna be people who's gonna be like, wait, but your God says that there's slavery allowed, and I'm like, yeah, but have you read the laws about slavery?
It's not the same.
It's not at all the same, right? Because we have this mentality about what slavery is, right? Slavery is the whipping, slavery is the putting down, making people feel small. But when you read the Torah, it's like, hey, if one of your slaves loses an eye, you have to pay him for that eye. If one of your slaves loses a tooth, you have to free him for that tooth, because they weren't meant to lose that. Like there's this weight of honor as we're speaking about treating people how they're meant to be treated, no matter where they're at socially.
With dignity.
With respect. And like, people don't understand that, and they'll just take things out of context and make people mad. It's like, no. But when you really study and look at it, there's this mentality of every single human being deserves respect, deserves honor, deserves dignity. And we should not take that away from them.
Yeah. I was going to say. So yeah, that's very true. That the Bible is a lot about restoring honor or maintaining honor. It's never about putting people down and shaming things. It's usually about, people are shamed if they don't keep, uphold God's commandments, which is, I think, the next thing that we're going to talk about. Another aspect of honor is, if somebody does an oath, what they're putting on the line is their own honor, because if they don't keep the oath, now, that makes them a liar, that makes them dishonorable. And, and if you do oaths under God's name, like I see a lot of people do today, like, I swear to God and things like that. They do it without thinking, like if I swear under God's name, I'm also putting God underneath that oath, So if I break that oath, then not only am I shamed, I'm also shaming God's name because I broke that oath. I broke that promise. And the Torah is essentially, an oath that we made a pact with God.
Exactly. It's a contract of laws that needs to be abided. And what's really interesting that you bring that up is the fact that the Torah is one of the few, if not the only, ancient Near Eastern document that lists everything of the positive and negatives. It tells you everything. Lays it all out on the table right from the start.
There's no bias.
Back then, you would swear by their god, and you're of their service, so like the Assyrian gods, the Babylonian gods. You don't know what displeases the god.
Exactly.
No idea. So you're constantly doing sacrifices. You're washing your temples and everything in blood to keep away the demons. You don't know what's going to piss them off. You could die tomorrow, and that's because I've been wrong today. Who knows? But at least with the Torah, you know exactly where you stand. You know what is expected of you. You know what happens when you abide, what happens when you don't abide. And that's a very rare thing. It's a very special thing considering the age of the Torah itself.
And even in the last portion, I think last week's portion, Numbers 30, where it gives you the laws or the rules for the oaths, and they establish a difference, and I like that, for men and women. So there's no confusion. There's no it's because you're a man, you can do this, you can do that.
Yeah.
Or it establishes, and it gives you a way out too, or a way of like, okay, if you made it yourself, or for me as a woman, if I make it myself and my husband doesn't know, then I'm free of that. It says so right there. Right. But if I make an oath and he knows about it, he has to make me accountable for it. So it's like, wait. So it gives me support. It gives me like, no, you made an oath. Your husband knows about it. Now you have to do it twice, like double.
Accountability.
It wasn't like a pinky promise back then. Like an oath was a serious deal. It wasn't
An oath was a serious thing, and there's many showings of it throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Yeah.
But it's just even going back last week when we talked about taking the Nazarite vow, and that whole episode with that was also swearing an oath. But again, the most important thing is knowing the stipulations of the oath before you make it was not a normal thing back then. At least when it came to deities. When it comes to you and me, that's super normal. All right, I'm going to do this. If I don't, this is what happens. Cool, got it. When it came to God and man,
You didn't know.
I mean,
It's
you
like,
only,
maybe
you
he's
only have
hungry.
his word. I mean, you have God's word. I mean, that's all we have. You know, His word. So He gives us like a mirror. Like, if my word is so important, so is yours.
Exactly.
You are my creation. You're supposed to be obedient to my commandments. So your word is important too. If you make an oath, if you make it legally, then you have to do it.
He made the oath. Now he challenges us to keep the oath.
Exactly. Just like he has to keep his oath, like, okay, I'm going to bless you if you're obedient, or, you know, you're going to have curses if you're disobedient.
Exactly. And unfortunately, we live in an era, and you know, it's probably been like this for a long time. There's been people like this through every generation, but where your word doesn't really mean anything.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But back then, you know, whenever you made an oath, you would swear by the name of your God, and just putting it out there, a common oath formula in the Bible is as like the Lord lives. Like they would swear in the actual name of God. They would say like as He lives, and then such and such. So by you swearing by the name of your God, that other person hearing that's like, oh wow, it's like, oh, he's putting the name of his God on the line. It's like, I mean, that's a pretty
It's
powerful
real.
God. People that swear by that God's name, I know that's the God of justice and righteousness, the God of equity and mercy. This God, this is a pretty good God, and he's swearing by His name. I was like, man, I bet he's going to hold His promise.
Exactly.
And if you do keep your promise, you as the image of God have basically just upheld that that your God carries out His word, like Eva was saying. But if you break your oath, you have just drug the name of God through the mud. It is unforgivable. It's a very, very bad thing. You know, it's like it's as if you've brought God down to your level, and you've essentially made God out to be someone who just lies, someone that breaks His promises.
Yeah.
Kind of flaky, whatever. Yeah. I see. I love what you said. I just think you need to change the term word to honor. When you swear by God, you are a reflection of the honor of that God. And when you break it, you are now dishonoring and dragging His honor through the mud.
I mean, that's why it's so important that you keep the commandments, because if you break the commandments, you're essentially dishonoring God. You know, if people see that you're not keeping the commandments, they're going to be like, you know what? Like, for example, like us, we go out into the secular world and we talk about how we keep the Sabbath and stuff like that. The moment they see that, I don't know, I eat a bacon sandwich and I walk into work on a Saturday, they be like, wait a minute.
Wait.
This
guy doesn't believe anything.
It only takes one time.
It takes one time to like, this whole thing is garbage. Cause
I had. Can I talk about this moment I had? There's so much. It's very much close to what you're saying now. I had. So we were before entering work. This is gonna take me like 5 minutes. Before we were entering work, I had my tzitzits on, right? For those who don't know, tzitzits is the
tassels,
string of tassels of blue that you're supposed to put on each corner of your clothing to remind yourself of the commandments of the God, so you don't fail Him, right? So you maintain His honor. Right, so I have these on for work. I usually like tuck them in my pants because my work is dirty. I'm a cook. There's a lot of meat. I cook with things that aren't necessarily kosher. So I like putting my tzitzits inside so they don't touch anything that's nasty, right? So before work, I had them outside, and he looks at me. He's like, "What are those?" And I'm like, they're just something that helps me remind myself of what God wants me to do. And he's like keeps looking at them, and I'm like, touch them if you want, like grab one. And he was like, oh, I can't because I am a witch, un santero to be specific, right?
That's why
he literally said, I'm a witch, so I can't touch them. And I'm like,
wow.
Listen, you can touch them if you want. I feel no shame. I don't feel bad. If you feel like you want to touch it, you can touch it. I have no problem with it.
Maybe he couldn't touch it.
No. And one of the guys who was with us, he was like, "Don't touch it because you're gonna get all that voodoo stuff on you." And I'm like, "Listen, man, I was like, listen, in my mind, I was like, listen, my God is so much stronger than any other God, man. I have no fear of anybody touching my CC. So I tell him, hey, if you want to touch it, touch it. So I like grab it by the hand, my CC by the hand. I'm like, here you go. And he hesitantly, like, slowly starts moving in and like grabs it.
Imagine this is more violent than what you're saying.
No.
Oh no, please.
So he grabbed it.
And he blew up.
That shift for me was one of my worst shifts possible. Like I had such a bad day. Like everything was awful. And the guys were like, oh, that's because you let him give him your voodoo. And I'm like, listen, I was like, listen, boy. That has nothing to do with his voodoo. That has everything to do with my mentality at work today. I'm okay. I know my God's okay. I'm chilling, man. Whatever. The day goes by. 2 days later, we're hanging out outside of work. And he's like, and he does something that's so opposite to himself. What did he do? He's a very negative person. He's like angry all the time. He's angry at everybody. And like for the first time, he gives mercy like from the beginning. Like out of nowhere. He's like, yeah, it's okay. I'll give you mercy. And no one noticed it. And I looked at him as like, it's maybe because you touched my seat.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone was like, oh, you're getting cursed because you touched your CC. I'm like, no, maybe you're getting blessed because you touched my CC.
Oh, there you go.
And I'm only able to do that because I keep my way in my work, because I give my God honor. And because I give my God honor, he is able to be like, I'm gonna respond back to you. I'm gonna give you something that's gonna represent me.
I'm sure it was like this, like.
That's a good point, because you actually bring up a very good point. That's a covenant isn't always something you swear and that's it, one and done. It's something like the seats or like a wedding ring. Hey, look at that. It's something you swear, and now this is that is the mark of your covenant. Now, if I go to like strip clubs, or if I go to someone else's house and I just go hang out with other people, with other ladies all the time, I'm reflecting poorly on the covenant I made to this one. Exactly. There you go. So even things like a marriage is a very valid covenant, and it's exactly, and it needs to be upheld, and that's through your own actions all the time. So you can equate all this stuff in the Torah, exactly the same way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Really good.
Well, I guess the next and the last aspect that we're going to cover is honor reversal status. And I think the best example is, Joseph's story. He starts out, with having a lot of honor with his father. He gives him the coat. Everything's going fine, and then one wrong turn, and his brothers throw him in the pit, and then he ends up in prison. Well, then he ends up, with as a slave. Then he ends up in prison, and then out of nowhere, they're like, "Hey, do you want to be in charge of the prison?" And he's like, "Yeah."
Yeah, sure. Why not?
And they're like, "Hey, you interpret dreams, right?" Like, "Yeah." Well, the Pharaoh, he had this weird dream. Can you interpret it? And like, "Yeah." And then it's like, well, you know what? Now you're second in command to the whole country. It's like, okay.
Yeah, cool. All right.
So like it did like a complete like whoop, like 180. What?
Go continue.
No, you can go. What are you gonna say?
No, it's fine. You finish and then I'll continue.
Well, I was gonna say like it shows how the Father can like restore you in life. Even if things seem like they're not going that great. Things can only go up as long as if you're following God's commandments. Because
this is what I was. Oh, okay. Russell, you go.
I want to give it like a pop culture analogy.
Go pop culture.
Pop culture.
And then I'll continue.
Yeah. So it's kind of like. So guys, think of like we're watching like a movie, right? And our protagonist, our main character, our big hero, we know he's the hero. We know he's like the good guy, but he's kind of this nothing. He's this little dude, just nothing. No one really thinks anything of him. He's kind of like this nerd. And
actually, real quick, what genre is this? Because if this is a musical, I'm out. I'm not doing it.
No,
it's not a musical. It's okay.
Bro, let's talk about Napoleon Dynamite.
There you go. My man.
Hey, Napoleon Dynamite. So he's kind of
By
this
the
like
way,
he's this loser in school, right? Like no one really likes him. Everyone thinks he's kind of funny, and they make fun of him. They take his tot, well, they smush the tots in his pocket, and they kind of,
Yeah.
and but Napoleon finally has like his big moment where he's helping Pedro out, and he goes and he dances on stage for him, right? Like he goes and dances on stage, and everyone's just like, what? Everyone thought it was like the coolest thing, and it won Pedro all the votes for what was it, like
president of whatever.
Class president, I think.
class president, something like that. Yeah. And so, but Napoleon was kind of this nothing, but he had his big moment where he shined, and it really made all the difference. And it's kind of like an honor reversal. He went from being this low nobody, no one really liked him. Everyone was like, "Whoa, that guy can do something really cool." And suddenly, this guy who's this nothing, everyone's kind of like, "Oh man, well that was something." All right.
Can I one up you? Let's go with
Please,
pop
go ahead.
culture reference.
Please go ahead. And,
All right.
a better example.
So let's see Joseph, right? This person who's just doing what's right. He's put into nothing, and suddenly he becomes this great thing. Who does that not remind you of, if not Captain America, man? That's Captain America perfectly, because like when you see the movie per se, right? Captain America is this weakling, this like nobody, like I don't want to say nerds are weaklings, but like right, that's how they portray him. He's this nerd, this geek who's like, who are you, man? Like how are you gonna like put? But he stands up for what is right, and he fights even though he knows it's a losing battle. He fights for what's correct, right?
American always
right. Until the point that he jumps in front of God bless America. He jumps in front of a grenade in front of everybody, right? He's like, I'm not gonna let nobody die, and that's what pushes him to be.
That's like story right here.
For those of you who are just listening and not watching, Alex is holding up a Captain America action figure.
It's his
action figure.
America.
So at this man, the moment that lifts him up to become a thought in the you should be in the Weapon X program, right? Was that he jumped in front of a grenade. So they gave him the serum, and he became Captain America. So with Joseph, right? Do you think Joseph would have been so blessed if he didn't live the way he lived? If he didn't push for righteousness when wickedness was overcoming, right? When the woman was like, "Hey, sleep with me, even though you're the servant of my husband," he said no, and he ran away.
Naked.
So something that in Hebrew roots, that in Hebrew roots and in Christianity is sometimes taken out of context is God's grace, right? Some people say God's grace is earned. Some people say God's grace is always given, right? But when you look at Joseph, he earned God's grace through it all because he maintained himself, though everything was outside of his grasp. Everything pushed him to be an evildoer. Everything pushed him to just seek his own glory. He said, "Hey, my God wants me to live this way. So I'm going to keep myself living this way." And God responded with acts of blessings. He says, "You know what? Because you're behaving so honorably, I'm going to put you in a place of honor. So you're going to be the boss of this household. You're going to be the boss of the jail. You're going to be the boss of a nation." And it all came through because of deciding to honor the God that you're serving through actions, through beliefs, through everything.
You say something? Or you're just like, you just gasping? Or?
I
think Alex is going to say something.
So, just real quick, I just want to add a couple things here. As a nerd, I just want to make a couple of addendums. Love the Captain America reference. Sick. Solid. Great.
That was great.
Weapon X happened after that as a result of trying to copy the theory.
The thing is,
years ago, America was revealed to be a secret Nazi. Anyway, moving on. Just saying.
Pause. No,
Wait,
stop,
come on.
stop,
No, no.
stop for a second.
No,
Stop
No,
for
no,
a
no,
second.
no,
Stop
no. We're
for
not
a second.
gonna.
Stop for a second.
want-
One
it's-
second, Jonathan. Just one second. The reason I mentioned Weapon X program is because the Weapon X program is a result of Captain America. That's the only reason I mentioned. He is the original.
Later,
He's the
in our
original.
actual-
He's the
Oscar
original.
Oscar gets a
Moving on.
point for technicality. Okay, he gets a point for
All right.
technicality because that's
Second,
technically yes.
Yeah. Okay. I accept
Okay, but Alex, you wanted to say something. You were like,
No, no, I was gonna put myself in the honor reversal status.
oh,
it's
yeah,
true.
that's true.
You're living that.
I feel like I personally, from my experiences, when obviously you put yourself in a position where you want to honor God, and that implements meaning that you have to be willing to listen to His word and be open minded to uh, what is out there. Right? There's like we live in a world where they don't understand what we do, what we follow. Right? So we have to be understanding of their perspective, but at the same time, is you have to find your way, and how do you become a light in the world? Meaning, how do you become a difference in the world, right? And so, like I was teaching, is like the only way we can be a difference is that we can act differently, right? When we say we don't work on the Sabbath, and we're very extreme on that, people will say, okay, this is serious. He's serious about his faith. He's not another religious person that says he believes something but does the opposite. You know, this person is serious. And in that moment, even though it might be small, but you might be changing that person's perspective on your faith, right? And that's when I personally feel like I have been in the honor reversal status, because I feel like I stand for that, right? I do my best to honor him the best way I can. And if I have control of it, whether it be the Sabbath, the feast, my family, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to honor Elohim. And anything that is out of my control is something that I can't control. And so He has given me honor based on my firmness in His word, and obeying His commandments.
But I think that connects a lot with the parable of the prodigal son in the New Testament. I remember the first time, when I heard somebody said that it was a story about the two houses of Israel. Like, it changed like the whole perspective of the story. Because before it was just like this really cute story about like the son, he leaves his daddy's house and then he comes back and the dad welcomes him. Like, that's a nice story. But then when you look at it as you had the two houses, the house of Judah, the house of Israel. One stayed, the house of Judah, but the other one, the house of Israel, they were dispersed because they refused to follow God's commandments. They committed idolatry. So just like, in the parable, the son goes off into the world, the Israelites, they went off into the world and they went, deep in shame. Just like the son, he was so deep into the world to the point where he lost himself, and eventually, he lost his money, his honor, and he was eating with the pigs, and that's like a picture of like Israel's shame. They had so much shame being so far away from the Father. But when he realized, like, I had this thing that was way better before, like, let me just go back to that. He goes to the Father goes out to meet him, which I think your dad was talking about that usually, like, in the culture, it was the son that would go up to the Father. But the Father went up to him in this case, which is like, he's showing, mercy and kindness to his son, even though his son was very disrespectful, because he was like, I want my inheritance. I want it now, and I'm going to do whatever the hell I want with it. So he's being very shameful, very disrespectful. But just because he wanted to come back and, and he turned around and he showed, how do you say it? Because he didn't come, like, oh, I'm your son, you got to take me back. He was like, I'll do anything, okay? I'll do any tiny job.
Yeah.
I'll be the footstool, if you need me, I'll do anything. And that's the kind of attitude that a person has to have when they come to the movement, when they come to God, because through Yeshua, God, he uses him to get these people that, like, hey, you might be this certain person, you may not fit in this culture or whatever, but I can make you a better person. I can make you an honorable person.
I think that Yeshua like summarizes God's mentality quite simply. It says, "Hey, if you want to be first, you will be last. But if you're willing to be last, you will be first."
Exactly.
Like that's just it. If you're humble enough to be humble and like to accept the position, God is more than willing to give you more than you deserve through honor because you behaved correctly.
And I think
And that's just
that's
how. Yeah, go.
no, like you were saying, like you got to be humble, and that's the thing that you see in some churches. Like you go and they're like, I demand in the name of Jesus, that this blessings come raining down upon me, and it's like
COVID.
very, very aggressive. Yeah, like
It's like Alex was saying with his own relation to the kind of shame to honor. So I feel a lot of resonance with the prodigal son. And so a few years ago, I used to live in California, and I went out there with big dreams and big ideals, and like I was gonna do this and do that and be a big name and all that stuff. Needless to say, a lot of things didn't work out.
I wasn't in the picture, by
She
the way.
wasn't in the picture, by the way. So
Get used to that one.
I felt like a failure. I felt like a failure. I came back in 2017 with my head hung low in shame. I genuinely felt shame. Thank you. The Captain America does help tell the story. I can thank you for that. I do. So at the time, I felt shame and everything, and I came back to my father's house, no less. And I could have gone to my mother's house, but I decided to go to my father's house instead. And it was there that he extended mercy, and he helped me feel. He helped give me honor, helped me feel not like a failure, helped me build me back up. And through my relationship with Adonai and him, and having all you guys as my friends, and having the real dudes around me and everything, and over the past few years, I've thankfully to the Father, been built back up, and now I have a life that was far and away better than what I ever imagined a few years ago.
Amen. Yes.
Hallelujah.
Anyway, I love it.
it touched me.
I love you guys because you guys help, and I love you.
I love you two being married. I love you.
All right, take it easy. Take it easy.
Oh, another example about the honor reversal status. David.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
David,
that's true.
He went up, down, up, down, up, down.
Yeah.
The most was with the adulterer, where he, basically killed her husband, and then,
Yeah, the whole stuff went down.
and then his son died. That was the punishment.
Yep.
And he accepted it and was like, yeah, I mean,
I
he prayed during the process, but then when his son died, he was like, okay, let's keep being obedient then. Let's restore that honor, because he knew he did it wrong. He knew
And David, David had a real low, and a real high.
Yeah.
Like when you really study the life of David, and you see the bloodshed amongst his seed, amongst his children, because of what he did.
Yep.
But then you realize that he said, hey, I must serve God because I understand the consequences of my actions. I understand that I still have to live up, and I still have to keep moving, and I still have to honor him, no matter the result of my own life, because his goal in life was to build God's temple. God said to him, you got blood on your hands, you nasty fool. Heck no, right?
It's like that. That's exactly what he said.
Exactly what he said.
That's exactly what God said to him. Quote, of course not. This is a joke. He didn't really say that, right? But even so, he maintained himself, right? And he said, I'm gonna be loyal. And even if it's not me who does it, even if it's my son,
My descendant.
I'm still gonna be loyal, because I understand that I have to make up the honor that I lost in my actions. And that in itself is very beautiful, and very foretelling of what we should do as humans.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that you take away when you learn about honor and shame. It's about how much you carry on yourself, with your actions specifically. What you do and what you don't do. You can make the wrong move and you shame the Father, and you can do the right thing and you can elevate His name. It's not just about you.
Yeah.
When we go out, we're like
Mhm.
ambassadors, and we represent Him. So our duty is to represent Him the best way as possible.
Yeah.
And
Be
I think
self-aware.
that's what was it?
To be self-aware.
Yep.
And can I add like another example of honor reversal and talking about us being ambassadors of the Father? We, as those who live in the image of God, or at least we should, we can go around and show other people, like this is what my Father's about, and you can be a part of this family as well.
Yep.
Like you who may feel that you have no way, you who feel that what's the point of all of this, you who might feel like you're a nobody. It's like, in my Father's house you are a somebody.
Yep.
Yep.
It's like, if you please come into my Father's house. But Eva.
No, they're saying amen.
And with the kids, we're told, well, I'm a teacher, and we're told like kids are not gonna do what you say, they're gonna do what you do.
Right.
We have to model that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And if we model that behavior of like, you're welcome to this covenant, you're welcome to this family if you accept the laws, and these are the these are the instructions. If you follow them, then you're gonna see the fruits of that.
Yes.
Of that.
About covenant.
Yeah.
That's what we're called.
If
Israel.
I'm thinking in Spanish. Sorry.
if I can add more to what Ava is saying and what Russell is saying, right? Our God, one of the reasons out of so many that I am in love with the way that He moves and deals with things is the ability that He has to give honor to those who don't necessarily have lived up for it, right?
Or deserve it.
Right, deserve it. But you, like, for example, when you think of nationalities, when you think of who we are as humans, right, we're constantly trying to peg people down, right? If you're in any nation, an immigrant is not the same level as you are, and it's not trying to be about racism. No, nothing like that. It's just, I'm from Puerto Rico, right? In Puerto Rico, who we look at who most people look badly at? Dominicans.
Mm-hmm.
And they're right next door, and they're like, heck no. If you're a Dominican, it's like, wait, why are you racist to someone who's basically just like you? And they're like, well, because they're from another island. I'm like, that's stupid. That's dumb. Right? They're like an hour away from you. Why are you being angry? So the thing is, that's natural in human nature, to be like, oh, you're an outsider. You don't belong here. Hence, you are less than us. But God, from the beginning, is like, you're an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
But you can earn yourself in if you behave correctly, right? In Isaiah, he says, hey, outsiders, Gentiles, as they're called in the Torah, don't say to yourself, this God will never make me part of the covenant. No. If you say, I love Yah, right? If I love Yud Hey Vav Hey, and I will keep His covenant and I will keep His Shabbat, you will be a part of the covenant.
Okay.
That's a reversal of honor, and God is willing to give that to every single person who is willing.
Yeah.
If you're willing to enter, if you're willing to change your mentality, if you're willing just to accept God and walk how He wants you to walk, it's an instant reversal change.
Yeah.
You're no longer who you used to be. You are now part of the covenant. You now deserve every benefit that the covenant gives you, because you're part of the covenant.
Yeah, right.
But I think that's pretty much sums up like the whole thing. Like you said, there's that opportunity to have your status elevated, and it's not like the other nations where you have to do these crazy things to make yourself look good or whatever. And the point is, if you want to be part of the covenant, you can. You just got to be under these guidelines. And what was that?
The first commandment in Exodus 20, that's how it starts. I am Yahweh your Elohim, who took you out of Egypt. You shall not have any other gods before me.
Nope.
Right there.
No God.
Because I changed your status of slave to citizen. Our
Shame.
God is a God
Yeah,
of
there you go.
honor. As simple as that, man.
So I think we can close it off with that statement. All
We
right,
did it, everybody.
we did it. All right,
We did it.
we'll
Remember
see.
that what's honorable and shameful in the world is not always what's honorable and shameful in the kingdom of God.
Hmm.
We'll quote that. We'll put that on a
Amen.
billboard.
Actually, make that our last statement. Hey, yeah, we're saying God is honorable, but hey, check out what honor is actually.
Yes. Follow the Messiah. Follow his example. He'll show you
Yeah,
what's really
just-
honorable in the
Yeah,
kingdom
just
of
follow the
God.
Messiah. Yeah, just do that.
All
This
right.
doesn't mean you can do everything.
So I'm gonna close off. So let's goodbye, everybody. Yeah.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for
Bye.
watching.
Bye.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye.